with Nittis, who's much more of a salon painter, we're looking at flat areas of colour or blended colour, and areas of close description, and then big areas of different description, much more vague description. And in the with the figures, where he's worked in a much more detailed way, you've got this lovely blue, sky blue, which is possibly phthalo blue, white, and a little ultramarine, and he's given this figure a shawl that is partly in shadow and partly lit, and that edge just very, very delicately worked in here with a small brush, giving the sort of little bit of light that's catching on this shawl. The rest of that is cast into shadow. The whites are very subtle in this figure, because this is the lightest part of the image. So it would be useful to see that, and this sleeve, for example, is quite bright. You can see that the upper part of the sleeve, or the cuff rather, is quite bright, which is a lacy sort of cuff. And the rest of the sleeve looks like it's made of some sort of semi-translucent material, because you can see a pinkness coming through there. It isn't quite as white as the cuff, but there is light, a description of light in the creases and folds on that sleeve. So it's very detailed, but also quite subtle. The blue-grey that exists elsewhere, that exists here in the sky, I think can be used, something very similar to it. We've got ultramarine white and a little crimson and a little ochre to make a blue-grey. That is for shadow. So he's painted the shadow in quite a photographic way. It's very accurate, very much following the contour, and he seems to have painted it in a single colour. I'm letting some of that ochre come through, so you can see these little bits of shadow here from this white dress, and then the white of the larger part of the garment isn't quite as white, I think, as the cuff there. It has got some other, got a little bit of pink in it, maybe a little bit of blue. It's certainly the whitest thing one of the lightest areas in the image. The edges of shadow are not sharp edges, so normally Nittis rather has created blurred edges there. The way this feeds into the weeds and so on in the field in the foreground. So wet on wet, this is one of his methods, I think. Blurred sfumato technique, painting with the grey into the white and modelling a little bit, because the body is a cylinder to a degree, so you have curves, or a round shape. We're trying to describe a round shape in the figure, and then the way that the figure dissolves into the foliage, into the plants. So that figure is the lightest thing in the whole image. That changes the image, I think, when you start putting that lighter shape in. The other figure is, if anything, a little more complex, because there's less of the top half visible. This stripy waistcoat really does present a challenge, because the contours of the stripes describe the form of the figure. So there is a lighter colour there, and there's the same sort of light applies to both figures. It's just that the shadow cast onto the brown garment that the figure on the right is wearing takes on a brownish hue, but I think it's still shadow, so my feeling is it should still relate. So that was the blue-grey for this shadow, and this is a slightly browner version of that shadow, but they still relate to each other. So these shadows in this figure aren't completely different. Sort of what's going on with the hat, for example, that's in shadow. This little section of the figure here, very accurate, careful bit of painting. And these other shadows are all so the bustle, there's a shadow on that, relate to the sky as shadow is a part of an effect from the conditions from the weather. So this is in shadow. Shadow coming around here, little bits of shadow coming around this figure. It's more involved, it's more intricate. There are pleats, there are folds, much more definition. It's almost like he's showing off, really, compared to this one. Little pleats and folds in there. And then the lighter colour, which is a warm brown ochre colour. This is so that's that sort of light ochre value, something like this going in here, and then blending into the shadow. So the ochre colour that I put down first is serving a purpose, and that's just giving that some definition, but this is also very carefully drawn as it is painted. So that's quite an intricate sleeve there, quite intricate folds in the bottom of this, the lower part of this garment. Since he worked, I think, in such detail, I think he would have to work wet on dry. So do something like this and leave it to dry, and let it dry, and paint it in stages, which is typical of the way that a studio painting would be made, since they're both studio paintings, I suppose. So this is darker, that dark there, darker there, little bits of darkness there, little bits of drawing edge, twisting and turning the brush. So whether it's the reproduction or whether it's the painting, this part of the figure is in shadow here. This part would have to be shadow underneath the figure, and then this is cast shadow from the figure, which must have some reference to everything else. So if that shadow colour is a sort of greenish grey, something like that, then the same colour exists here, exists there, exists in these patches. It isn't just one area of odd colour. It does look rather greenish, and I am suspicious of that in the print. This is, I think, got to have a little more grey in the value. And again, scumbling or dragging, turning the brush. So you're trying to make a varied surface, because this is so much more precise, this is so much more carefully painted, using the edge of the brush and drawing into these folds here on dry probably. You need a bit of solvent with the paint. So he's got that method of painting, which is much more academic, much more salon type painting. The way these folds go round the form, give a little definition to it, that little bit of shadow shadow in the neck, and then all this looser painting over here, which is much more free in expression. So cadmium, yellow, yellow ochre and white. There's a build-up of more dense paint. Before we get to the little curious white flowers and the poppies, denser golden yellow. So that's golden yellow made with ochre and cadmium yellow, and I build that up, build it up, scumble it on the surface. Ochre plus cadmium yellow. It's quite bright, some of it's quite a bright yellow, surprising. Then ochre plus cadmium yellow plus crimson. It's got a warmer colour perhaps, not quite that. Yeah, warmer colour through here. Before we get to the detail on the mark making, probably build this up so that it's denser, because part of the description in this painting leaves that white dress as the lightest part of the whole image. So that must mean that this is all a little bit darker. It seems to fade out into this, but all of this has to be duller, darker, for this to stand out. So this at present is too pale, and one of the ways to assess tone would be to look at that and then say look there and look there quickly and make a comparison, because this seems light here, for example, but it isn't, I don't think. It's a bit cruel to the brush to be scumbling away like this. And then there is an area of light green right in front, which is here. More yellow, yellow green, yellow green. It just pulls this forwards from all this ochre to have this green in the foreground. So I think that vague layer could dry first and then put more specific marks on top. At the moment, if I try and paint onto that, it's going to simply blend and diffuse, and his marks are quite sharp. So whether you're looking at Nomellini and this painting, and this way of painting in a divisionist method, or you're looking at this more academic, more traditional salon type painting, and whether you're working from your own photograph and your own materials, it's still this element of looking at the big areas first, establishing the tonal differences, and with this particular painting, where the focus is and where not to focus, because we can't be focused everywhere, and to a degree with this one too, where the focus is in the figures and where there is less focus, because again in this there isn't focus everywhere, although there are marks everywhere, there isn't the same degree of attention here as there is here. I hope these videos are useful to look at and to get an idea for methods and techniques. And I hope the next communication will be by Zoom. So the next communication will perhaps not be by video, but be by Zoom, and you should be getting a Zoom invitation for a meeting next Wednesday.